A dark room, heavy breathing. The bodyguard is so close, and he has my secret book. The Bodyguard Affair by Emily gives you hope. It helps you make brave decisions and better conversations. Watch my summary now and read it.
Imagine the smell of it first.
Yeah.
Just picture that.
Right.
It is an oppressive, heavy scent, a suffocating, almost tactile mixture of ancient dust, trapped, stale air, and the sharp chemical tang of industrial floor wax that just coats the back of your throat.
That industrial wax smell is very specific to those old government buildings.
It really is. And you are crammed into a space no larger than a coffin. Around you, in the pitch black, is the discarded debris of political power. Miscellaneous landscape paintings that didn't poll well, forgotten state gifts from minor dignitaries, stacks of fine china that haven't seen the light of day in decades. It is completely dark, save for a razor-thin, agonizingly bright sliver of harsh fluorescent light creeping in from beneath the heavy wooden door.
And you cannot breathe.
You cannot breathe. Or rather, you can only manage these shallow, jagged, terrified gasps. Because if you expand your lungs fully, if you take in the oxygen your panicking brain is begging for, your chest will press entirely against the chest of the person trapped in this closet with you.
The proximity is absolute.
The heat radiating between your two bodies is stifling. It is a suffocating, trapped heat. The humidity in this tiny, forgotten space is rising with every frantic exhalation. And the only sound louder than the deafening, frantic thumping of your own heartbeat in your ears, is the sharp, rhythmic click, clack, click, clack of high heels on the polished hardwood floor outside.
Those heels belong to the Prime Minister's wife, Gretchen Nichols.
She is walking down the hall. She is looking for you. And tucked firmly beneath the arm of the tall, impossibly muscular man pressed flush against you in the dark is a book, a paperback romance novel. A highly scandalous, intensely explicit novel about a prime minister and his assistant having a torrid, illicit affair. A novel that you secretly wrote.
The stakes in that specific moment are astronomical.
You are holding your breath.
Yeah.
You are staring at that sliver of light beneath the door. You're waiting for the doorknob to turn. You're waiting for your entire world, your carefully constructed, sterile, professional life to absolutely implode.
Because if she turns that handle, the architecture of 3 separate lives collapses instantly.
Exactly. Welcome. You are here with us for a deep dive into Amy Lee's The Bodyguard affair. And our mission today is not just to recount a story. We're going to painstakingly dissect this brutal collision of high-stakes political optics, the deep, often entirely misunderstood psychology of caregiving and attachment trauma, and the profound, deeply rooted cultural stigma attached to romance writing.
It is essential to establish right now, for you listening to this deep dive, that while the source text deals extensively with the fictional Democratic People's Party, the DPP, and their conservative opposition, our analysis here takes absolutely no political sides. We are operating strictly within an impartial framework. We are treating the political arena merely as the petri dish in which these psychological experiments are conducted. We are dissecting the narrative mechanics of these characters. We are not endorsing, validating, or critiquing any political ideology presented in the text.
The politics in this text, while suffocatingly ever-present, are really just the scaffolding. The actual architecture, the real terrifying structure we need to explore, is inside Andi Ziegler's head. And Andi's daily reality is something we need to sit with. We need to actually sit in the discomfort of it, because before she is trapped in that claustrophobic closet with a close protection officer, she is engaging in a task that is so profoundly mundane, so deeply humiliating for a woman of her intellect, it almost defies belief. She is folding the Prime Minister's underwear.
The tidy whities.
Yes, tidy whities. She is standing in the laundry room, essentially playing a game of cotton Jenga with Eric Nichols of White Proofs. Let's really unpack this.
It is a stark, almost violently depressing image when you consider the trajectory that brought her there. You have a woman who entered the political sphere as a bright-eyed, idealistic intern. She is armed with an advanced degree. She presumably entered this arena eager to draft policy memos, to engage in the dialectic of governance, to perhaps incrementally change the socioeconomic fabric of her country. And the reality of her proximity to the ultimate seat of power is doing laundry, specifically managing the most intimate unmentionables of the head of state.
And it's not just a random chore. It is a direct result of Underweargate.
Underweargate, a deeply absurd yet chillingly plausible scenario where a pair of the Prime Minister's briefs found their way onto eBay and sold for $750.
$750
Yeah.
for a used piece of cotton.
which forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about the nature of political celebrity and the invisible labor that sustains the illusion of power. What does that faintly humiliating task actually say about the mechanics of control? You have Andi, the personal assistant to Gretchen Nichols, tasked with this solely because the household staff can no longer be trusted. Andi is deemed trustworthy enough to handle the literal dirty laundry. But in doing so, the narrative highlights her sheer, suffocating lack of agency. Her daily life is entirely devoid of literary substance or personal autonomy. She is a ghost in the machine of the Nichols family's public image. She steams a capsule wardrobe of neutral linens. She buries the deceased family hamster in the backyard so the optics of a grieving prime minister aren't interrupted. She is, fundamentally, a highly educated, deeply invisible servant.
But if you look at her internal monologue, she doesn't see it as entirely meaningless. She had this moment of reflection where she considers that maybe changing the world isn't always about grand policy documents or standing at a podium. Maybe it's in the small, honorable, everyday tasks. Rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty to support the people who do stand at the podium.
That is nothing more than a desperate coping mechanism. It is a psychological rationalization of her own subjugation. She is a people pleaser to her absolute core, and if we are to understand Andi, we must trace that directly back to its source, her mother. Her mother, Amanda, who only cares about the optics at her local golf club. Her mother, who views Andi's entire existence, her career, her appearance, her relationship status, through the hypercritical, unforgiving lens of how it reflects on her social standing among her peers. And Andi's submission in her professional life is not nobility, it is a direct trauma response. She has been conditioned since childhood to seek validation through invisible servitude and the hypervigilant management of other people's emotional states.
I hear what you're saying, and the trauma response is undeniably part of her foundational architecture. But you are actively ignoring the dual life she is leading to survive that exact trauma. You are looking at the personal assistant who folds the underwear and completely dismissing the woman who goes home to a quiet apartment, opens her laptop, and writes "The Prime Minister and Me." Because Andi Seigler is secretly AAZ, a best-selling erotic romance author. And we need to be clear about what she is writing. This isn't sweet, closed-door, fade-to-black romance. This is an 11 out of 10 heat level. This is aggressive, unapologetic, highly explicit female desire.
Erect peach nipples?
Yes, that is...
That is a direct quote from the text. Her employer, Gretchen, actually references having to stop reading the book because of the phrase erect peach nipples. You are framing this secret identity as some grand, radical reclamation of control, but we need to interrogate the actual literary merit of this escapism. It is described as face-sitting smut. It is algorithmic, trope-heavy indulgence. Does writing highly explicit, biologically improbable erotic fiction truly constitute a reclamation of agency? Or is it merely a dissociative retreat from a mundane reality she lacks the fundamental courage to confront in her waking life?
It is absolutely a reclamation of joy. You cannot dismiss it just because it isn't a dense, tragic literary tome that wins awards for making people miserable. Joy is foundational. It is essential. Gloria Steinem herself has spoken endlessly about how joy and bodily autonomy, even fictionalized, imagined bodily autonomy, are radical acts in a society that constantly, relentlessly demands women police their own desires and shrink themselves to fit into polite spaces. Andi is trapped in a buttoned-up, hyper-scrutinized, relentlessly sterilized environment in Ottawa. Writing this highly explicit, incredibly steamy romance is the exact and only space where she holds absolute power. She dictates the terms of pleasure. She controls the narrative. She ensures the happy ending. In a world where she is forced to bury a hamster and pretend it's a state funeral, giving her characters explosive, satisfying, unapologetic orgasms on various surfaces around Parliament is an act of profound, localized rebellion.
It is a rebellion that takes place entirely in the shadows, carrying a catastrophic risk to her actual livelihood. Which, of course, brings us to the broader cultural obsession with political sex scandals. The text brilliantly juxtaposes Andi's fictional scandal with a very real one within the narrative, Finance Minister Kirkwood's nanny scandal.
Oh, the screenshots, the leaked texts.
Yes. The excruciatingly cringe-inducing use of the word bosom in a text message to a 20-something subordinate.
Why do men in power suddenly speak like Victorian ghosts the moment they're inappropriately propositioning their staff?
Because immense power isolates, and isolation breeds a profound, almost pathological disconnect from modern social reality. But the Kirkwood tangent serves a vital thematic purpose here. It asks us to look at you, the listener, and society at large. Why does the public demand this performative, pristine, completely sexless morality from our leaders? Yet we consume the salacious details of their inevitable downfalls with such ravenous, insatiable appetite. The media frenzy surrounding Kirkwood and eventually Andi reveals a core societal hypocrisy. We build these panopticons of virtue around figures like Eric Nichols.
And for those listening who might not be familiar with that architectural concept, a panopticon is a theoretical prison design. The idea is that the inmates can be watched by a central guard tower at any given moment, but they never actually know when they're being looked at. So they begin to police their own behavior constantly. And that is exactly what 24 Sussex is for Andi and the Prime Minister, a psychological prison of constant unseen observation.
Precisely. We demand they be walking, talking Disney princes with 74% approval ratings, knowing full well that the human condition cannot sustain that level of flawless purity. The panopticon demands perfection, and the public delights when the perfection cracks.
It's the thrill of the descent. We want them to be gods so we can feel the seismic impact when they finally hit the pavement and into this hyper-scrutinized, incredibly high-stakes, deeply flawed environment steps Nolan Crosby.
The close protection officer.
Not a bodyguard. He is very, very specific about that distinction.
And we must spend time analyzing that distinction because it deliberately subverts the foundational genre expectation. The traditional bodyguard trope in romance relies heavily on the fantasy of a lethal, imposing, often emotionally volatile protector. The James Bond fantasy. The hulking mass of muscle in dark sunglasses who is visibly intimidating and resolves conflict through violence. Nolan Crosby explicitly rejects this entire framework. He explains that a CPO's job is to blend into the background, to be entirely invisible, to use subtle, almost imperceptible hand signals, drawing fingers together to signal his team to step in, pulling them apart to signal them to back off. The entire operational goal is to prevent an issue before it ever arises. As he states, if a physical altercation occurs, the CPO has already failed his mission.
But he still carries that underlying, undeniable alpha male architecture, doesn't he? I mean, he isn't just a security guard. He is former JTF too. For those unfamiliar, Joint Task Force 2 is the elite special operations force of the Canadian Armed Forces. It's the equivalent of the U.S. Navy SEALs or Delta Force. He has jumped out of planes into hostile territory. He has run clandestine sources globally. He has passed psychological selection processes designed to completely break 90% of applicants.
Which only reinforces the trope you claim he subverts. He is the ultimate lethal weapon, merely sheathed in a well-tailored suit.
But look at why he is taking this specific posting. He isn't seeking glory. He isn't looking for a firefight. Ottawa is considered a snooze fest in his world. It is literally viewed as a punishment posting. His own boss does the running man dance in the office when Nolan agrees to take the Ottawa job because nobody wants it. He is subverting the alpha male narrative by actively, intentionally seeking the most boring, deeply domestic assignment possible for profoundly emotional reasons we will uncover shortly.
Before we delve into his pathology, we need to address the temporal mechanics of their relationship. The narrative employs a significant and perhaps controversial structural choice, a 3-year time jump.
The bathroom walk-in?
Yes, the inciting incident of their acquaintance is remarkably undignified. A broken lock in a unisex bar bathroom. Andi is wearing a black chiffon one-piece jumpsuit,
which requires complete top-to-bottom removal just to use the facilities. Imagine the agonizing vulnerability of that moment. She is entirely exposed, physically trapped in the ugliest beige bra she owns, her jumpsuit around her ankles, and the door swings wide open to reveal Nolan standing there with his, as she describes them, blue raspberry Kool-Aid eyes.
The author leans heavily into comedic humiliation here to strip away their professional veneers. But from a structural standpoint, we must ask, is the 3-year time jump that immediately follows this scene truly necessary? Does it add emotional weight to their eventual reunion at 24 Sussex, or does it merely disrupt the narrative momentum? We have a brief, vortifying encounter, a mildly charming apology sequence where he brings her groceries, inexplicably builds her IKEA desk, leaves a polite note about fixing her sliding door, and then he vanishes entirely for 36 months.
It is absolutely fundamentally necessary. It establishes the misconnection motif that haunts the rest of the book. If they had started dating right then and there in the apartment, it would have been a standard, run-of-the-mill contemporary romance. The 3-year gap is the crucible. It allows Andi to become deeply entrenched in the suffocating, soul-crushing reality of her job with Gresham. It allows her secret identity as AAZ to flourish from a hobby into a vital, life-sustaining emotional lifeline. And crucially, it allows Nolan's family situation to deteriorate to an absolute critical breaking point. When they finally meet again at 24 Sussex, they aren't the same people from the bar. They are both carrying significantly heavier, much denser armor.
The armor is certainly necessary in Ottawa. The text treats Ottawa, their nickname for the capital, almost as a secondary antagonist. The setting is critical to understanding their isolation. You have the claustrophobic, heavily monitored atmosphere of 24 Sussex Drive. Every movement is logged, watched, scrutinized by security, staff, and political operatives. There is zero privacy. And this internal panopticon is set against the freezing, isolating, brutal reality of an Ottawa winter. The environment itself demands defense mechanisms just to survive the physical and psychological chill.
Which is exactly why the physical sanctuaries they find later are so incredibly important. The yellow house where Andi lives, and later the rescue farm, these are the rare, sacred places where the political gaze cannot penetrate.
But the political gaze does penetrate, eventually. It always does. Which brings us to the actual catalyst of the plot, transitioning us from a quiet character study into a high-stakes PR crisis, the deployment of the fake dating strategy.
It starts so innocently. Andi sets up this incredibly romantic anniversary dinner for Eric and Gretchen at La Maison. She spends hundreds of dollars on exotic orchids. She hires a live harpist. It's perfect. But Gretchen doesn't show up. She just bails. Eric is absolutely devastated. He is sitting at this beautifully set table, the leader of the country, literally crying. Andi, because of her trauma response need to fix things, sits with him to comfort him, to offer advice on how to repair his fractured marriage. Nolan is the only other person in the room standing guard. And someone, a server, a patron, snaps photos on their phone.
And the media, operating on the algorithmic hunger for scandal we discussed, twists these entirely innocuous images, a supportive touch of the elbow, a brief, empathetic hand, squeezed into a torrid, scandalous affair between the Prime Minister and his wife's personal assistant. And Gretchen's reaction to these photos is arguably the most chilling moment in the text. It is entirely devoid of emotional betrayal. It is pure, calculated, ruthless political strategy.
She doesn't even bother to ask if the affair is real at first. She doesn't care about the truth. She just wants to know how to neutralize the optics before the polling numbers drop.
Exactly. She deploys the fake dating trope with the cold efficiency of a military general. She decides that if Andi is publicly seen aggressively dating Nolan, the CPO, it will provide an immediate PR smokescreen. It will redirect the media narrative, confuse the tabloids, and protect Eric's re-election campaign. It is a deeply cynical, utterly utilitarian use of human relationships.
But that cynical strategy leads to one of the most profound, beautiful character studies in the entire text. The football game.
You cannot be serious.
You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but we need to talk about the gas station snacks. We need to spend real time on this.
We are going to dedicate 10 minutes of analysis to an IKEA bag full of junk food.
We absolutely are. Because this is where the romance trope completely breaks down and becomes something deeply, surprisingly real. They have to make a highly publicized appearance at a football game to sell the fake relationship. Andi is terrified. She's facing the public, the cameras, the whispers, for the very first time since the affair rumors and the early doxing of her secret identity started bubbling up online. She is practically vibrating with anxiety. And Nolan shows up, and he brings a comically large blue IKEA shopping bag. He literally bribed the stadium security guard to get it inside. And inside this bag is a hyper-specific, painstakingly curated collection of Andi's favorite, deeply mundane snacks: chips, chocolate bars, and licorice all sorts.
Licorice all sorts are a highly polarizing, fundamentally abrasive confection.
Exactly. That is the entire point. They are not a universally beloved candy like milk chocolate or gummy bears. They are complex. They are weird. They have those bright pink and yellow layers of strange, desiccated coconut wrapped tightly around a dense, black, intensely bitter anise core. They challenge the palate. A lot of people hate them. And Nolan remembered this specific strange detail about her from a passing conversation. He didn't bring her a massive bouquet of long-stemmed red roses. He didn't buy her a diamond necklace to sell the fake relationship to the telephoto lenses. He brought her licorice all sorts.
You are suggesting that his selection of a divisive, objectively unpleasant candy is a profound psychological gesture?
I am suggesting that it is the very essence of true radical intimacy. It is the definition of being known, truly, deeply, comprehensively seen. Nolan isn't performing the role of the romantic lead for the paparazzi. He doesn't care about the cameras. He is curating a micro-environment of absolute safety for Andi in the midst of a panic-inducing situation. He is looking at her and saying, through the medium of gas station candy, I see the complex, slightly weird, unglamorous, challenging parts of you, and I have made space for them. I accept them. That is what foundational joy looks like in practice.
It is a poignant reading of the text, yet we cannot ignore that this entire charade, regardless of the emotional safety he provides in the moment, is built on a foundation of gross professional malpractice. We must circle back to the reality of her situation and the stigma attached to her actions. Andi Ziegler's secret identity as the author of The Prime Minister and Me is eventually exposed. The media links her initials, her location, the specific details in the book. The book rockets to #1 in the Amazon charts. And what does she do? She cowers. She continues to hide behind this fake relationship.
What was she supposed to do?
She should have resigned immediately. The absolute second the book was definitively linked to her, the only ethical, responsible action was to step down from her post. She wrote a highly explicit novel fantasizing about her married employer. Regardless of her subsequent claims that she viewed Eric merely as a platonic older brother figure, the optics are entirely indefensible for a public servant. She compromised the Prime Minister's office. She humiliated Gretchen. The fact that she stays, that she actively participates in this elaborate, deceitful PR lie, demonstrates a staggering lack of maturity and professional accountability.
You are judging her by the sterile, unforgiving, fundamentally patriarchal metrics of the political machine. Why must women always fall on their swords for the sake of institutions that do not care about them, that would replace them in a heartbeat? Resigning immediately, slinking away into the night would be a public concession that she did something morally wrong by writing romance. And she didn't. She wrote fiction. She explored fantasy. Let's do a thought experiment. If a male staffer had written a grim, violent, politically subversive thriller where a fictionalized prime minister is brutally assassinated, would he be forced to resign in disgrace? Absolutely not. He'd be lauded for his gritty realism. He'd get a multi-book publishing deal and a spot on cable news. Andi is penalized because female pleasure, specifically female pleasure divorced from reproduction or male service, is viewed by society as inherently scandalous, dirty, and compromising. I will aggressively defend her right to hold her ground. Feminist theory, again going back to Gloria Steinem, argues that women's bodies and their minds are political battlegrounds. And Andi's refusal to immediately disappear into the shadows is a radical assertion that her interior life, her imagination, her joy, has intrinsic value that supersedes the Prime Minister's polling data.
It is a fascinating, highly impassioned ideological stance, but it conveniently ignores the reality of her employment contract and basic conflict of interest parameters.
A contract shouldn't dictate your soul.
Let us move deeper into Nolan's psychology then, because his participation in this fake dating scheme, his willingness to engage in this deception, is equally complex and rooted in deep trauma. We have touched briefly upon his attachment avoidance.
His military service as a literal flight response.
Precisely. For the listener to fully grasp Nolan, we have to define attachment avoidance. It is a psychological framework where an individual, typically due to early childhood trauma or neglect, learns to suppress their attachment system. They equate emotional closeness with danger and inevitable pain. We learn that Nolan's mother abandoned him and his younger sister Emma when they were small children. She prioritized her new husband, her new family, completely leaving them behind. Nolan's response to this profound, foundational betrayal was to develop a severe, ironclad avoidant attachment style. He joined the military, he joined JTF2, he traveled to every hostile continent, running sources, jumping out of planes into war zones. He literally engineered a life where he could never, ever stay in one place long enough to attach to anyone, and therefore could never be abandoned again. The danger of combat was safer than the danger of love.
And yet, look at what his current reality is. The irony is suffocating. He has taken a punishment posting in Ottawa. The lethal, untouchable Special Forces operative is working what he calls as sedate geriatric security detail. Why? Because the very mother who abandoned him, the architect of all his trauma, now has early onset Alzheimer's disease. He is physically and emotionally tethered to the very source of his deepest pain. He's our primary caregiver.
This is, without question, the narrative's heaviest burden. The Alzheimer's subplot. It elevates the text beyond a simple romance and forces us to confront the grueling, unglamorous psychology of caregiver burnout. Nolan is slowly drowning under the weight of an obligation he did not ask for to a woman who utterly failed him when he needed her most.
The bacon for dinner scene.
Yes, the cognitive dissonance in that kitchen.
If you are listening to this right now, and you've ever had to be the parent to your own parent, if you've ever watched someone you love slowly lose the timeline of their own life, you know the exact suffocating weight of this scene. And Johnny goes over to his house, and his mother, Lorna, is in the kitchen. She is confused. She thinks it's Nolan's birthday. She is living years in the past. She is making him bacon for dinner because she remembers somewhere in the fractured pathways of her fading mind that he liked bacon as a little boy. The smell of grease is in the air, the cognitive dissonance of eating breakfast food at dinner while grieving a living person standing right in front of you. And Nolan, he doesn't correct her. He just accepts the plate. He eats the bacon. He lives inside her fractured reality because pulling her back to the present, reminding her of the truth, would only cause her terror and pain.
The stakes of caregiving depicted here are immense. There is a suffocating, omnipresent guilt that permeates every single decision Nolan makes. The text details his agonizing struggle with moving his mother into Lakeside, a specialized memory care facility. This is a universal trauma for families dealing with cognitive decline. The brutal reversal of the parent-child dynamic. Nolan is now the parent, making the unilateral, agonizing decision to institutionalize the woman who gave birth to him. He feels as though he is abandoning her, locking her away, just as she abandoned him all those years ago. It is a psychological mirroring that is deeply, viscerally painful to witness.
And it all compounds. The caregiving, the fake dating, the media scrutiny, it leads to its absolute breaking point.
He hits a wall.
They visit the rescue farm together, just to get away from the city. And there is this dog, Cody. He's an older dog, abandoned, rough around the edges, needing intense care and patience. Nolan looks at this dog through the chain-link fence, and you can see through Andi's eyes the absolute bone-deep exhaustion in him, the weight of carrying his mother's fading mind, the weight of his own enforced isolation, the weight of these terrifying feelings for Andi that his avoidance pathology refuses to let him acknowledge. He decides to adopt Cody. And in that specific moment, he breaks. The man who survived Special Forces selection, who jumped out of planes into gunfire, who built this impenetrable fortress of ice around his heart, the ice just shatters, he cries. For the first time in 20 years, Nolan Crosby cries. He doesn't sob, he just lets the tears fall silently, uncontrollably. And Andi just holds him. She doesn't ask questions, she doesn't demand explanations, she just absorbs his grief. It is such a profound, beautiful moment of absolute vulnerability.
It is a complete stripping away of the armor. It is a raw display of emotional collapse.
It is the moment the fake relationship ceases to be fake, even if they won't say the words out loud yet. But the problem is, the outside world doesn't care about their quiet moments of healing. The political machine demands its pound of flesh. Which brings us out of the sanctuary and directly into the climax at the Chateau Laurier.
The Breast Cancer Charity Gala. The setting here is highly intentional. A Renaissance-inspired grand ballroom.
Crystal chandeliers casting fractured light, massive champagne ice sculptures slowly melting. A room literally vibrating with expensive perfume, forced laughter, and cutthroat political ambition. Andi is desperately trying to hide by the fondue station, just trying to survive the night, half listening to some MP drone on about marginal tax rates, and the doxing happens.
For clarity, doxing is the act of publicly revealing previously private personal information about an individual, usually online, often with malicious intent. And this is not a subtle leak. It is a catastrophic, completely public exposure. A reporter shoves a phone in Andi's face. The media has definitively, undeniably linked her to the book, to the pen name, to the explicit content. Her identity as AAZ is exposed to the entire ballroom. And the immediate fallout is not just to Andi's reputation. It triggers the collapse of the Nichols marriage. Gretchen corners Andi in a side room and coldly evinces that she and Eric are officially separating.
But we have to ask, did Andi's lie actually destroy their marriage?
We must analyze the structural integrity of the Nichols marriage long before this gala. Gretchen has been profoundly, deeply unhappy for years. She feels sidelined, reduced to a smiling prop in Eric's political theater. The text shows us Eric consistently canceling their anniversary weekends for strategy meetings. They sleep in separate bedrooms. Andi's book and the subsequent scandal did not cause the fundamental fracture. It merely applied the sudden, intense pressure necessary to shatter an already fragile, webbed pane of glass. It simply exposed the cracks that were already there to the public eye.
Andi tries to do the honorable thing. She tries to fall on her sword. She tells Gretchen she will step down immediately to save Eric's re-election campaign. But the damage is done. The glass is broken. And in a strange, almost darkly comedic twist of fate, the very scandal that completely ruins her political career acts as pure rocket fuel for her writing career.
This provides a crucial tangent into the actual realities of the modern publishing industry. We must look at Andi's sudden, meteoric ascension to the #1 spot on the Amazon charts. This is a perfect distillation of the real-world evolution of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. In the past, literary success was entirely gatekept by a select few New York editors and critics who decided what was worthy. Now the algorithm reigns supreme. And what does the algorithm feed on? It feeds on outrage, it feeds on scandal, it feeds on virality. Andi is doxxed, her personal reputation is dragged through the mud on national television, she is branded a homewrecker, and the direct, immediate result is a massive, incredibly lucrative spike in book sales. Public moral outrage is instantly, seamlessly monetized into Kindle downloads.
It forces her hand. She can no longer hide behind Gretchen's neutral linens. She has to step into the light and own her identity as AAZ. She has to choose herself. But just as she is finally finding her footing, finally claiming her joy, Nolan drops his own bomb.
The Denmark posting?
Yes, the Denmark posting. And this is where we are going to disagree extensively.
Let us examine the facts objectively. Nolan receives a call from his former boss, Jones. He is offered a highly lucrative 2-year contract for royal protection in Denmark, guarding the second-born Danish princess while she attends university. It is the absolute elite tier of his profession. It represents undeniable career progression. It is clean, it was prestigious, and it takes him far away from the claustrophobic, politically toxic, emotionally draining environment of Ottawa.
And he genuinely considers taking it. He considers packing his bags and running away. Again.
He should have taken it.
Are you serious?
I am entirely serious. Look at it objectively. We must look at this through a lens of rational self-actualization. Nolan is a highly skilled, globally trained operator. His entire identity, his self-worth is built on competence and mobility. This narrative expects us, the reader, to believe that the noble romantic choice is for him to completely reject international prestige to stay in Ottawa, a city he has explicitly stated he hates, working a lower-tier, unfulfilling job, all for a messy, complicated relationship that literally began as a cynical PR stunt. This is a toxic, deeply regressive romance trope. It conditions the audience to believe that giving up your absolute career potential, sacrificing your ambition for love, is the ultimate romantic gesture. It sets both women and men back decades. It demands professional sacrifice on the altar of domesticity.
You were looking at his life like it's a spreadsheet, like it's a resume. A resume is not a life. Human happiness is not a math equation based on prestige and salary brackets. What is the point of guarding a princess in a beautiful palace in Denmark if you are completely dead inside? You call it a toxic trope. I call it profound, earth-shattering bravery.
Bravery. To stagnate, to deliberately limit one's potential.
Bravery to stay. Look at his psychology. Nolan's entire pathology is built on fleeing. When things get hard, when attachment threatens to pierce his armor, he jumps out of a plane, he flies to a new continent. Denmark is not career progression. Denmark is a regression to his deepest trauma response. It is the easy way out for him. Staying in Ottawa is the hardest, most terrifying thing he could possibly do. It means staying still. It means facing his mother's terminal decline day after day. It means looking Andi in the eye and admitting, I am terrified, but I need you. He chooses the difficult, messy, entirely unglamorous reality of changing his mother's sheets at lakeside and eating licorice all sorts on a cheap couch over the escapist, sterile, lonely fantasy of a European palace. That is not stagnation. That is the definition of healing.
You are romanticizing professional self-sabotage to justify a romance trope.
I am prioritizing human connection over empty capitalist metrics of success. The man was miserable jumping out of planes. He admits it at the luggage carousel at the end. He tells Andi he loves her, that she is the first person in his entire life he has ever pictured a future with, a home with. If he goes to Denmark, he is choosing the armor over the heart. And the text validates this choice. He doesn't just quit working, he stays. He takes a job with the Governor General. It's a job with better, more stable hours, allowing him to visit his mother at the memory care facility more often, allowing him to build a life with Andi and Cody. He doesn't give up his career entirely. He recalibrates it to serve his life, rather than letting his life be entirely consumed and destroyed by his career.
It is a highly convenient recalibration. It allows the narrative to tie up its loose ends neatly without ever addressing the deep resentment that historically follows such profound personal sacrifices.
There is no resentment, because he finally has what he actually wanted all along, what he was too afraid to ask for, a family that won't leave him. Which brings us to our final verdict. Looking at all of this, we have to answer the ultimate question. Is the Bodyguard affair a subversion of the rom-com, or is it simply a tribute to it?
It attempts to be both, which is perhaps the source of its greatest structural tension. It relies heavily on the most classic, universally recognizable tropes imaginable. Only one bed, fake dating, forced proximity in a storage closet. Yet, it subverts the traditional happily ever after in its resolution. Andi does not return to politics. She does not heroically reform the corrupt system from within. She simply leaves it behind. And crucially, her writing evolves.
Yes. Let's talk about her sixth book. She transitions from writing purely escapist, high-heat fantasy where everything is perfect to writing about what she calls messy, mundane love.
It is a thematic shift from seeking a definitive cinematic ending to embracing the concept of a better beginning. The traditional romance novel ends at the altar or with the grand, sweeping declaration in the rain. This text, in its final chapters, suggests that the real work, the actual romance, is what happens on a random Tuesday morning when the alarm goes off, the dog needs walking, and the dementia care facility calls with bad news. It is a tribute to the entertaining mechanics of the genre, but a distinct subversion of its unrealistic emotional promises.
It promises that joy is found in the dirt, in the reality, not in the pristine fantasy.
The reality of it all, yes.
And so, we turn this back to you listening to this right now. We have spent this time dissecting Andi's trauma and Nolan's avoidance, but what about your own architecture? Where in your own life are you employing your own attachment avoidance?
Are you hiding behind a carefully constructed professional persona? Are you using your own version of Andi's invisible PA role or Nolan's stoic, unreadable CPO silence to actively avoid the terrifying, messy, unpredictable vulnerability of being truly known by another human being?
Are you curating a perfect resume? Or are you actually building a life?
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to consider. One not explicitly answered by the text, but heavily, inextricably implied by every single action these characters take.
If true intimacy requires us to drop our armor.
Right.
If love demands that we dismiss our own close protection.
How do we survive in a world that constantly, relentlessly demands we defend ourselves?
Exactly. Think about that.